You walk into a room with a clear intention, and then suddenly your mind goes blank because the moment you cross the doorway, the thought you were carrying just disappears as if it never existed. That strange pause, that quiet confusion where you stand still trying to remember why you're there, is not a glitch in your intelligence or a sign of distraction, but evidence of a hidden cognitive mechanism that silently reshapes memory every time you move through space. What most people do not realize is that your brain treats doorways as psychological borders, and the instant you cross one, your mind begins closing the mental file associated with the previous room. This phenomenon is known as the doorway effect, and it reveals something deeply unsettling about how fragile your sense of continuity really is. Because while you believe your thoughts flow smoothly from one moment to the next, your brain is constantly segmenting reality into discrete chapters without asking your permission. The moment you pass through a doorway, your brain interprets it as the end of one event and the beginning of another, even if nothing meaningful has actually changed. From the brain's perspective, the room you left belongs to the past, and the intention formed there is no longer prioritized for immediate access. This is why you can remember what you wanted seconds ago while still standing in the original room, but lose it entirely once you cross into a new space. The intention did not vanish, but it was archived, deprioritized, and buried beneath the cognitive load of updating your environment. Your brain is constantly asking one question in the background, which is whether the context has changed enough to require a mental reset. A doorway, no matter how ordinary, is interpreted as a meaningful shift in context, because for most of human history, crossing physical boundaries often meant danger, opportunity, or new demands. Your mind evolved to treat environmental transitions as moments that require attention reallocation, even if in modern life those transitions are trivial. So when you walk through a doorway, your brain reallocates processing power toward orientation, scanning, and situational awareness, pushing previously held intentions into temporary storage. This happens automatically and instantly, without conscious awareness, which is why the forgetting feels sudden and inexplicable. What makes this effect unsettling is that it reveals how memory is not a stable recording, but a fragile process dependent on context, continuity, and attention. Your sense of having a continuous self moving through space is an illusion stitched together by memory systems that are constantly editing, pruning, and reorganizing information. The doorway effect exposes the truth that your mind does not prioritize truth or continuity, but efficiency. If an intention is not immediately relevant to the new environment, it becomes expendable, even if it felt important seconds earlier. This is why the act of retracing your steps often causes the memory to resurface, because returning to the original context reactivates the mental file associated with that space. The room itself becomes a cue, unlocking the intention that was stored there. This means that memory is not just stored in your brain, but distributed across the environments you move through. Each space you occupy subtly shapes what thoughts are accessible to you at any given moment. This is also why people often remember things in the shower, on a walk, or while driving, because the change in context allows previously suppressed thoughts to resurface. The brain is constantly negotiating between holding on to the past and adapting to the present. Doorways force a decision, and the brain almost always chooses adaptation. What feels like forgetfulness is actually a survival-oriented prioritization system doing exactly what it evolved to do. But in modern life, where we move rapidly through many environments with abstract goals, this system often works against us. You may forget why you opened your laptop, why you picked up your phone, or why you entered a room, not because you are distracted, but because your brain has quietly shifted modes. Each transition creates a micro reset, fragmenting attention and intention across the day. This fragmentation accumulates, leading to the feeling that your thoughts are constantly slipping away. The doorway effect also explains why multitasking feels mentally exhausting, because each task switch is essentially a doorway your brain must cross. Every time you shift from one activity to another, your brain closes one mental context and opens a new one. The more frequently this happens, the more cognitive residue is left behind. This residue is the mental fog that lingers after interruptions. Your brain was never designed to juggle dozens of unrelated contexts in rapid succession. It was designed to move through environments slowly, with clear transitions and singular focus. Modern life forces the brain to cross invisible doorways constantly, fragmenting memory and attention at a scale evolution never anticipated. This is why the doorway effect is not just a curiosity, but a clue to a deeper problem with how we live and think. Your memory failures are not personal flaws, but symptoms of a cognitive system under constant contextual strain. Understanding this effect begins to change how you interpret your own forgetfulness. Instead of blaming distraction or intelligence, you begin to see memory as a negotiation between intention and environment. This realization can be unsettling because it suggests that your sense of control over your own thoughts is more fragile than you assume. Your mind is not a vault, but a moving stream shaped by the spaces you inhabit. The doorway is not just a physical structure, but a psychological trigger. Every threshold you cross subtly rewrites what matters in that moment. And once you understand that, you begin to see doorways everywhere. They exist not only between rooms, but between apps, conversations, tabs, and tasks. Each switch is a boundary your brain treats as a reason to let go. This is why forgetting feels more common than remembering in a world full of transitions. The doorway effect reveals that memory is deeply context-bound, and when context shifts too fast, memory fractures. What feels like a minor lapse is actually a sign of a deeper cognitive trade-off. Your brain sacrifices continuity in order to remain flexible. And while this flexibility once kept humans alive, it now quietly undermines focus, intention, and follow-through. This is only the surface of what the doorway effect reveals. Because once you understand how space controls memory, the next question becomes even more disturbing. If doorways can make you forget simple intentions, what else might be shaping your thoughts without you noticing? And what happens when the doorways are no longer physical, but psychological, digital, and constant? That is where this phenomenon stops being a harmless quirk and starts becoming a silent force that controls how you think, act, and remember in modern life. And this is only the beginning. Once you realize that memory is tethered to space, you begin to notice how often your mind resets itself without warning, because every shift in environment subtly signals your brain to reorganize what deserves attention. This reorganization happens below conscious awareness, which is why the forgetting feels personal, even though it is mechanical. Your brain is not asking whether the intention still matters, but whether it belongs to the current context. If it does not, it is temporarily set aside, not erased, but rendered inaccessible. This distinction matters because the memory still exists, but the pathway to retrieve it has been interrupted. The doorway effect is rooted in what psychologists call event segmentation, which is the brain's way of dividing continuous experience into manageable units. Instead of perceiving life as one uninterrupted stream, your mind automatically breaks it into scenes, episodes, and transitions. Doorways act as punctuation marks in this internal narrative. They tell the brain that one scene has ended and another has begun. In doing so, the brain closes the cognitive loop associated with the previous scene. This process allows you to function efficiently because holding every intention, detail, and emotion simultaneously would overwhelm cognitive capacity. The problem arises when modern life forces rapid, frequent segmentation. Your ancestors crossed fewer thresholds in a day, and when they did, the transition usually carried clear meaning. Entering a shelter, stepping into unfamiliar territory, or crossing a boundary often demanded heightened awareness. Today, you cross dozens of thresholds without meaning, purpose, or recovery time. Each doorway, physical or digital, demands a micro-adjustment from the brain. Over time, these micro-adjustments accumulate into cognitive fatigue. This fatigue does not always feel like tiredness, but like forgetfulness, distraction, and mental noise. The doorway effect also explains why intentions feel strongest when you verbalize them. Saying your intention out loud anchors it more firmly in memory, creating additional retrieval cues that survive context shifts. Without those cues, the intention remains fragile. This is why you can lose a thought simply by standing up. Standing signals movement. Movement signals transition. Transition signals reset. Even subtle changes, like turning around or shifting rooms, can be enough to trigger this process. The brain prioritizes adaptability over persistence. It assumes that what mattered before may no longer matter now. In uncertain environments, this assumption increases survival. In structured modern environments, it creates frustration. The doorway effect becomes more pronounced when cognitive load is already high. Stress, multitasking, emotional arousal, and sleep deprivation all weaken the brain's ability to maintain intentions across contexts. Under stress, the brain narrows its focus to immediate demands. Anything not directly tied to the present moment is more easily dropped. This is why you forget simple tasks most often when you are busy, anxious, or overwhelmed. The forgetting is not random. It follows predictable patterns shaped by attention and context. Digital environments amplify this effect dramatically. Every notification is a doorway. Every app switch is a boundary crossing. Every tab change resets mental context. Your phone is not just a device, but a hallway of infinite doorways. Each time you open it, your brain prepares for a new scene. The original intention that brought you there becomes vulnerable. This is why you open your phone for one reason and forget it seconds later. The device itself is designed to fragment context. It constantly invites your brain to abandon the previous mental room and enter a new one. Over time, this trains the brain to expect interruption. Expectation changes behavior. When the brain expects interruption, it invests less energy in holding intentions. Why hold something fragile if it will likely be disrupted? This creates a feedback loop where memory becomes increasingly shallow. The doorway effect then feels stronger, even though the brain is simply adapting to an environment of constant transitions. This adaptation comes at a cost. The cost is a reduced sense of continuity. You begin to feel like your thoughts slip through your fingers. You start many actions, but finish fewer. You feel mentally busy, but strangely unproductive. This is not laziness or lack of discipline. It is the predictable outcome of a brain navigating too many thresholds. The doorway effect also reveals why physical organization matters more than people realize. Cluttered environments increase cognitive noise. They create competing context cues that confuse memory retrieval. A clean, consistent space provides stable cues that help intentions survive transitions. This is why routines are powerful. They reduce the number of contextual decisions the brain must make. When actions occur in predictable environments, memory becomes more reliable. The brain no longer has to ask whether this is a new scene. It recognizes the pattern and maintains continuity. This is also why rituals help anchor intention. A ritual marks a transition consciously rather than unconsciously. Instead of the brain resetting automatically, the person guides the shift deliberately. This preserves intention across contexts. Without conscious transitions, the brain defaults to its ancient wiring. That wiring assumes that new spaces require new priorities. The doorway effect is not a flaw, but a feature. The problem is scale. Modern life overwhelms this feature with constant, meaningless transitions. Your brain does not know which doorways matter anymore, so it treats them all as potential resets. The result is a mind that is always updating, but rarely settling. This is why people feel mentally scattered even when doing nothing physically demanding. The energy is spent on reorientation, not action. The doorway effect quietly drains cognitive resources throughout the day. By the time you need deep focus, your brain is already fatigued. Understanding this shifts how you interpret mental lapses. You stop seeing them as failures. You start seeing them as signals. Signals that your environment is demanding more transitions than your brain can comfortably handle. This awareness opens the door to a deeper realization. If memory depends so heavily on context, then control over environment becomes control over attention. And if attention can be shaped by thresholds, then doorways are not neutral. They are cognitive levers. This raises an uncomfortable question. Who benefits from environments designed to fragment attention? And what happens when doorways are engineered rather than incidental? Because once thresholds are designed intentionally, the doorway effect stops being accidental. It becomes a tool. And that is where this phenomenon begins to intersect with power, design, and influence in ways most people never consider. Once you understand that doorways can be engineered, you begin to see how modern environments quietly exploit the brain's need to reset, because fragmentation is no longer accidental, but deliberately designed into the spaces you move through. Digital platforms thrive on context switching, because every reset weakens sustained intention and makes the brain more susceptible to distraction. Each scroll, swipe, and tap functions as a doorway, signaling the end of one mental scene and the beginning of another. The brain responds by loosening its grip on previous goals. This is not because you lack willpower, but because your neural architecture is being repeatedly prompted to let go. Over time, this trains the brain to expect novelty rather than continuity. Expectation shapes attention. Attention shapes memory. Memory shapes behavior. This chain explains why long-term focus feels harder than ever. The doorway effect becomes a daily cognitive tax, quietly eroding the ability to carry intentions forward. What is most unsettling is that the brain adapts to this fragmentation. It becomes efficient at letting go. This efficiency, however, comes at the cost of depth. Thoughts become shorter, intentions become weaker, goals become easier to abandon. The mind becomes skilled at starting but not sustaining. This adaptation feels like mental flexibility, but it is closer to cognitive erosion. The brain is being trained to treat every moment as temporary. When nothing feels stable, nothing feels worth holding on to. This explains the modern experience of forgetting what you were doing moments ago. It is not a failure of memory, but a learned response to constant thresholds. The doorway effect also reshapes how you experience time. When experiences are segmented too finely, time feels fragmented. Days feel busy but empty. Weeks pass without clear memory anchors. This happens because memory relies on meaningful episodes. When everything is an episode, nothing stands out. The brain cannot compress experiences into coherent narratives. Life begins to feel like a blur of disconnected moments. This is why novelty-heavy environments feel stimulating but hollow. They keep the brain alert but prevent consolidation. The doorway effect reveals that meaning requires continuity. Without continuity, experiences do not integrate. They evaporate. This insight changes how you approach forgetfulness. Instead of fighting your brain, you begin working with it. You reduce unnecessary transitions. You anchor intentions physically and verbally. You pause before crossing thresholds. These small acts create bridges between contexts. They signal to the brain that something must be carried forward. One of the simplest techniques is naming your intention before moving. Language strengthens memory traces. It creates redundancy. Redundancy protects against resets. Another technique is minimizing digital doorways. You close tabs. You silence notifications. You create spaces with single purposes. This reduces the number of scene changes your brain must process. Physical design becomes cognitive design. Where you place objects matters. Where you perform tasks matters. Your environment becomes an extension of your memory. This is not optimization. It is alignment. The brain evolved to function in stable contexts. When stability returns, memory improves naturally. The doorway effect also teaches humility. It reveals how little conscious control you have over mental continuity. Your thoughts are not sovereign. They are negotiated with your surroundings. This realization is uncomfortable. It challenges the myth of pure self-control. But it is also empowering. Because if environment shapes memory, then changing environment changes behavior. You do not need to force focus. You need to reduce thresholds. This reframes productivity. It becomes architectural rather than motivational. You design for fewer resets. You design for continuity. When continuity returns, forgetting decreases. Not because your memory improved, but because it is no longer being constantly interrupted. The doorway effect ultimately exposes a deeper truth. Your mind is not broken. It is responding exactly as it was designed to respond. The problem is not your brain. It is the number of doors you are forced to walk through every day. Some are physical, many are invisible. Each one quietly asks your brain to let go. When you learn to notice them, you reclaim agency. You begin choosing which thresholds matter. You slow transitions. You respect the cost of switching. In doing so, you restore coherence. Thoughts stay longer. Intentions survive movement. Moments connect. Life feels less scattered. And the next time you walk into a room and forget why you are there, you no longer panic or judge yourself. You recognize the doorway for what it is. Not a failure, but a signal. A reminder that your mind is shaped by space, and that remembering is not just about thinking harder, but about moving more deliberately through the world you inhabit. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology insights, self-awareness tools, and mind-sharpening advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.